Guys, so I took a break this weekend from the read aloud on Saturday and Sunday to enjoy the nice weather too, but I am back with Hidden Figures to read chapter 9 to you. This is called Breaking Barriers. Dorothy and her husband saw each other on the holidays and occasionally on the weekends. They added 2 more children to their family, and for the younger ones, Newsom Park was the home that they had known. Dorothy loved staying home to take care of the new babies, but there was never a question that she would return to work as soon as possible after the children were old enough to stay with a babysitter. Dorothy's job at Langley provided the economic stability for the family. While Dorothy and her children missed their family back in Farmville, friends from the West Computing office filled the void left by aunts and uncles and cousins. The group from the West Computing began a summertime tradition of organizing a picnic at a log cabin beach, a wooded resort overlooking the James River, a segregated beach built exclusively for black people. Dorothy preferred Log Cabin Beach to Bayshore in Hampton, where a rope divided Bayshore from the whites-only beach next door. At a log cabin, black families were able to enjoy the outside without being labeled with colored signs to remind them of their place. Dorothy earned a good salary, $2,400 a year, twice the average monthly wage for black women in the 1940s. When the laboratory operated on a 24-hour schedule during the war, Dorothy had worked the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift, taking care of her family by day and crunching the numbers by night. Most of the other West computers also decided to keep their jobs. The section had outgrown its original room in the warehouse building, and in 1945 they moved to spacious offices on the first floor of the newly built Aircraft Loads Division building. But by providing the needs of 6 children meant that the vacation didn't come along often. She sewed clothes for herself and her children, clipped coupons, and wore shoes until her feet pushed through the worn soles. She sacrificed for her children. Many evenings, Dorothy came home from work and made dinner for her family. After putting the meal on the table, she walked around the block until the children were done eating. She then only ate leftovers. She didn't want to eat before she knew that her little ones had eaten all they wanted for that day. A permanent job. The prediction that ended the war would destroy the economy of the Hampton Roads area proved incorrect. A defense industry boom followed the war, and it lasted decades. Hampton Roads became a military capital. After the war, the Norfolk Naval Base was established as the headquarters of the Navy's Air Command. Next came the Army's Transportation School in Newport News and the U.S. Coast Guard base in Portsmouth. In 1946, the Army decided to make Langley Field the headquarters of its Tactical Air Command. And then the following year, the Army Air Corps became an independent branch of the military, now known as the U.S. Air Force. The number of people working at the Langley dropped immediately after the war. Most people left voluntarily, choosing to retire or take other work. Many women computers left to return home or marry the men they had worked with. Engagement and wedding announcements filled the pages. Other pages were filled with birth announcements. The women had to figure out how to balance the demands of work, of family, and long-term work. Some women took off time to take care of their babies, while others quit their jobs altogether. But with the airplane growing ever more important to America's economy and its military, it seemed like Langley might always need talented computers. In 1947, the laboratory disbanded the East Computing Pool and sent the white women who had been working in that office to work in wind tunnels. All of the East Computing's assignments were reassigned to the West Computing. With the added work, the West Computing remained in high gear. It wasn't surprising that Langley wanted to keep Dorothy as a computer. In 3 years she had worked there, she had proven herself by handing in error-free work and managing deadlines without complaints. She earned excellent ratings from her bosses and had promoted to shift supervisor, managing 1/3 of the group that was now made up of 25 women. Men often came to the laboratory as junior engineers and were allowed to design the conduct of their experiments. Researchers took the women under their wing, teaching them the ropes. Women, on the other hand, had to work much harder to overcome the people's low expectations. A woman who worked in the central computing pool was one step removed from the research, and the engineer's assignments sometimes lacked the context to give the computer much knowledge about the project. The work of most of the women was anonymous. Even a woman who had worked closely with an engineer on a research report rarely saw her name on a final publication. The engineers assumed it didn't matter. After all, she was just a woman, and many of the men were blind to the fact that the women might have the same ambitions as a man. Sometimes a computer's work impressed an engineer so much that he invited her to join him working full-time with a wind tunnel group. For the women, this meant an opportunity to get closer to the research, and perhaps specialize in a particular subfield of aeronautics. A computer who could not only process data, but also understand how to interpret it was more valuable to a team than a pool computer with a general knowledge. Specialization became the key to managing the increasingly complex nature of the aeronautical research in the post-war era. Sonic boom. Many of Langley engineers shared a dream. They wanted to design an aircraft capable of flying faster than the speed of sound. And the women at Langley were no exception. They dreamed of this exciting possibility, which was seemingly less far-fetched by the day. To pursue this dream in 1947, a group of 13 employees, including 2 former East Computers, were sent to the desert in the western part of the United States to establish a high-speed flight research center. Their mission, to build the fastest airplane in the world, one that could fly faster than the speed of sound. The speed of sound is about 760 miles per hour. The exact number varies depending on the temperature, altitude, and humidity. Scientists used to think that flying faster than the speed of sound was impossible, but they were wrong. Mach 1st is the term for something. Mach 1 is the term for something moving at the speed of sound. When an object is moving this fast, the air molecules in the front of the object can't get out of the way quick enough, so they become compressed and form a shock wave. That shock wave is the noise we hear from the crack of a bullwhip or firing of a bullet. Scientists weren't sure that what would happen to a pilot if his or her plane flew at the Mach 1. Some researchers thought that the plane or the pilot would be destroyed by the power of the shock wave. Others disagreed. There was only one way we could find out: to try it. On October 14, 1947, pilot Chuck Yeager flew over the desert in the NACA developed experimental research plane called the Bell X-1. He then pierced the sound barrier for the first time in history. The plane caused a loud noise, a sonic boom, just like a shock wave from the bullet in the bullwhip. But the pilot and the plane were safe. The female computers on the ground verified the data transmitted from the instruments attached to the X-1 on its record-breaking flight. At the desert facility, the computers who helped with this experiment had the chance to do significant work and get credit for it. They were promoted from computers to the higher position of junior engineer and were named as the author of the research reports, a necessary first step in the career of an engineer. And for a woman, it was an extraordinary achievement. It meant that the whole world would see that she had contributed to the worthy piece of research and that she was an important member of the engineering team. Dorothy Hoover, another black woman who worked in the West Computing, was first African-American woman to leave the computing pool and get a chance at research job, working directly for an engineer. She had earned an undergraduate degree in math for an Arkansas Agricultural, Mechanical, and Normal College, and a master's degree in mathematics from Atlanta University. She taught in 3 states before coming to the Langley in 1943. She was an excellent at abstract concepts and complex equations. She had been assigned many of the most challenging problems and always submitted flawless work. As a talented mathematician with an independent mind, Dorothy Hoover was a perfect addition to the research team. Her visibility with engineers increased with her promotion. She answered the computer's questions and understood complex math so well that sometimes she knew more than the engineers in the lab. Dorothy was an excellent leader within the West Area Computing Pool. In 1947, one of her bosses got sick and was out of the office for much of that month. The next year, the boss fell ill again. Then in early 1949, Dorothy's boss began to act strangely at work. She suffered a mental breakdown and was forced to leave her job. The tragic incident left the computing pool without a leader, but the engineers at the laboratory decided to choose Dorothy to be the temporary head of the entire section. This was the first time an African-American woman had been assigned a management role at Langley. At this time, it was unthinkable for a man to report to a woman. Men were always ultimately the people in charge. Women who had an interest in management were limited to heading a section in one of the computing pools or a division with female workers only. but they always reported to a man. For Dorothy, the new job was a lot like being the head of a high school classroom or reporting to a principal, who usually was a man. It would take Dorothy 2 years to earn the full title of section head. The men she worked for held her in limbo. The laboratory had never had a black supervisor before, and they may have delayed making what seemed to be groundbreaking decision. Dorothy, however, was patient. Her promotion was official when a memo circulated in January 1951. Effective this date, Dorothy Von Hahn, who has been acting head of the West Era Computers Unit, is hereby appointed the head of that unit. Dorothy took on the new responsibilities with confidence. Many of the women in the West Computing knew she was the best candidate, and so did many engineers. In time, her bosses realized it too. History would prove them all right. There was no better qualified person for the job than Dorothy. All right, from that chapter, the biggest thing I want you to take from that is when they were doing this work, so when they were researching these numbers and doing all this research, the women that were in the West Computing could not put their name on the work that they had done with the engineer. Do you think that was fair, or was it unfair? It'd be kind of like doing a group project in my class and having a boy and a girl in the project, and only letting the boy take the credit for the work instead of the girl, because it's saying that women aren't as superior as men.